we really didn't want to deal with an injury. Obviously, you're never wanting to deal with that. But unfortunately, she has that injury to her foot. It was significant enough that it's going to take some time. And, so I think what the team has done, look, it's not easy. People think, oh, you just throw somebody else in there. Well, it's not that simple, right? We saw that last year. We played pretty good without her, but then even there's an adjustment period when she comes back. I think we're better this year in terms of being able to handle that. I think that when Yoki gets healthy, and we do think we're getting good news there, everything looks to be on track.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of Run It Back here on KCSN. I am your wonderful host, Jazsmin Halliburton, bringing all things K-State women's basketball. And when you know the season that these ladies are on, you can't do nothing but smile when you're talking about K-State women's basketball. And I am very grateful and very blessed to have that opportunity because, once again, the number 12 team in the country continues to deliver even after you had the highs and even after you had the lows with the injury to Yoki and that loss to Colorado, which we'll dive into that a little bit later in the show. But speaking of diving in later in the show, I also have a very special guest coming by. Yes, when do I not? Don't answer that. It's going to be Coach Mittie. He's going to be stopping by on the show. This man has been on my show more than any other coach or player. So I am truly grateful that he really messed with your girl like that. All right. So appreciate to Coach Mittie, who's going to be on the show just a couple minutes here. But first, I got to lay out exactly what went on with K-State women's basketball in the past couple weeks. I know didn't do a show last week. I had the flu, but now your girl is doing better. So that's why I haven't been as consistent as I was last week, especially since, everyone wanted to hear exactly what my thoughts were about that loss to Colorado. And at that time, because that was the first game since Yoki was hurt, right? We found that out. We found that she left early in the game before, couldn't finish, this, that, and the third. We knew what type of time it was. Unfortunately, I talked to Tamara Poindexter about it. This is a familiar horror story for K-State fans and especially for Ayoka Lee herself, right? I know no one wants to be injured, and you definitely know that she doesn't want to be injured. She's the best player that has come through K-State, men's or women's, right? She's earned that title. She has a banner already with her name on it in Bramlage, and she's going to have her jersey retired. It's not a matter of if, it is a matter of when, right? You want to see her on the floor, and she wants to be on the floor. But unfortunately, this was another season to where you don't get that from her for the entire season. Luckily that she'll be able to come back. This is a foot injury. She's going to be gone for the next couple of weeks. She's been gone for the past 3 games now. She'll be back, God willing, a little bit later in the regular season, going into the Big 12 tournament. But I know, like I mentioned before, it's a horror movie that K-State fans are very familiar with, not having Yoki. And when she went down, it was like almost a carbon copy of what happened last season, right? You had K-State, who was just absolutely moving, absolutely rolling, undefeated at this certain point in the season. They were number 2 in the country, and then she got hurt. And then that's when things kind of went downhill for K-State women's basketball during that rough stretch of time. There's times to where they were losing games where they would normally dominate. They would be having really close games to teams that you should dominate. It was a really rough stretch, and unfortunately that didn't change much even when Yoki did come back later in the season last year. So this is a horror story that I thought that we were going to repeat again when she got hurt this season. And I was terrified because when I saw against Colorado, Lord, not a fan of Colorado, but they just seem to have our number. but that was that first game back. And I know you can't just figure out what life is going to look like without Yoki. You can't figure that out in one game. I understand that. But that game against Colorado, they looked like they were trying to find their identity. It was the same issue that happened last season, right? They spent the rest of the season, even when they had Yoki back, trying to find that identity or trying to find something that they lost, right? That was all happened last season. That's what I thought was going to happen again this season, especially looking at that Colorado game. It seems like no one had trust in the post. You have possession after possession where the ball wouldn't touch the paint. It's like they didn't trust Amani, they didn't trust Kennedy, they didn't trust Eliza in the paint. That's what it looks like in that certain game, and that's how K-State ended up losing by 10, losing to an unranked team. They spent this entire season trying to get ranked inside the top 10. They finally do, especially after TCU ended up dropping a game against Oklahoma State that week. Everything was K-State's for the taking. But then in Colorado, they had our name. They punched our ticket at that certain point in time, and then K-State ended up leaving with a loss, right? I was nervous. I was frustrated. I know they were definitely frustrated. And then, so now, what are you going to do? Are you going to make sure that this is going to be the same thing that happens last season? Is this going to be the same movie? Or is this going to have a different ending? And now, we're not done with the movie yet, obviously, but now it seems like it's going to be moving towards a different ending. Because after that performance against Colorado, who do they have next? It's not going to get any easier, right? You had Iowa State. You have Iowa State at home, but that didn't matter. Iowa State has had our number, even at home, right? They've been able to hold their own. They've been able to hold us against the wall, essentially. It was always a tough matchups. It was hardly ever just, blowouts. We play them very well. We play them very, very tough. But you knew what type of time it was anytime you're going to play Iowa State, right? And that's exactly what everyone found out in this game. K-State ended up winning this game 87-79, this game going to overtime. Now you had to really figure out, okay, going into this game, what was K-State's answer going to be to Audi Crooks? That was a matchup made in heaven. Essentially, if you are a basketball fan watching Audi Crook and Ayoka Lee battle it out in the post. That game that also went in overtime and Ames last season before Yoki got hurt, bro, that was cinema. That was literally cinema. Audi Crooks, she's cementing herself as one of the best players in the Big 12 and even some of the best player in the country. And then you had obviously the All-American and Yoki just battling out Goliath versus Goliath in the paint. That was true ball. That was ball. That was poetry in motion, right? And you wanted that matchup again. Unfortunately, we didn't get it. But now you have a situation where Audi can eat. And eat, she really did in this game because she ended up scoring 28 points and having 11 rebounds, right? But you had the game plan. What was the game plan going to be? They doubled Audi. They left a few, Iowa State players opens in the wing. That was especially early on in the game. You kind of knew what that was the game plan. That was the game plan. They were going to do their best to double Audi. Didn't have the size inside to stop her. So you had at that point kind of to force other shooters around her to make some happen. And this is a team that has more weapons than just Audi Crooks. They have Addie Brown and they have Emily Bryant, right? These are players that we have seen. We have known they can get the ball out the net, right? And that's something that they were able to do. They ended the game shooting with 12 3-pointers out of 36. I know coming in, they weren't a very good 3-point shooting team. So maybe that's why early on kind of helped dare them to shoot the ball a little bit more. But as things go on, defense. That's something that I've talked about so much with the Gap Goat. When sometimes offense is not going your way, that defense will always travel. I'm not saying offense didn't go their way in this game for K-State, but defense kicked off a whole lot of things in this. When you have a situation to where 60% field goal percentage is going to be out for the next couple games, you need to find some way else to get the ball in the paint and be able to score the basketball, right? Outside of just shooting up threes. And that was something that happened at Colorado. Shots weren't necessarily falling. The ball wasn't touching the paint. And that's where problems lie. Then you go against Iowa State here, and now they learn their lesson of what they're able to do, what they're willing to give up, and how long they're able to give that up for, such as those wide open threes. That wasn't gonna be the case. They tightened up that defense. You had Terrence Sides having probably not over the overall just like best game of her career. This was her best defensive game by far. She had 4 steals in this game. I want to say, correct me if I'm wrong. I want to double check. Net 4 steals in this game. I never thought as Terrence Sides to be a liability on defense, but this level of defense that she was playing, she was coming weak side help when they were trying to pass the ball into Audie Crooks. She was able to deflect some passes. She was able to pick pockets. Anything that you needed her to do on the defensive side of the ball, she did. She absolutely did, and was still able to get rebounds. She had 5 rebounds and still be able to do her job as a point and dish off 5 assists, scoring 17 points, going 4 for 4 from 3. She's not new to this. She's true to this. We already know what she can do when the ball is in her hands and she's got a wide open look to the net. You know what she's going to do with it, and she's going to make it over 50% of the time. Like, that's just what it is. That's the type of time that she is on. But we know that from her. We're not going to be surprised that she's going to score 17 points. And we love to have that type of spoiledness, right? But her defensive effort in that game, that was one of the difference makers, especially when this is a game that went into overtime. And I'm not just shouting out her. All across the board, everybody did their job defensively. They forced, hold on, I want to double check. They forced 23 turnovers against Iowa State. And of those turnovers, 18 of those were steals. Pressure, full court pressure. You had a situation like full court pressure. Sometimes those don't always end in a turnover. That takes a lot of time off the clock, right? That takes a lot of time off the shot clock. And sometimes that's going to rush up into shots that they don't want to take, or they're going to try to force the ball into somewhere they don't want to force it to. And maybe that will end up being turned into another turnover, right? This was overall team basketball and one of the best I've seen. Yes, it was overtime. Yes, it wasn't a blowout. But once again, this is Iowa State who we are talking about. But this was an absolute team win. Serena Sundell doing exactly what she does and what she needed to do, taking over in the second half of that game. 23 points, 8 assists, 4 rebounds. Ziana Walker, she was playing with some of her best defense this season as well. She was doing something I would love to see her do more, and that was take advantage of the mid-range. That was something that they could not stop in this game against Iowa State. She had 11 points, 1 assist, 1 steal, 1 block, 7 rebounds, right? Jalen Glenn, you know what type of time it was. She got the party started in overtime with 5 straight points. She finished the game with 10 points, 2 steals, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, just getting the job done. Can't forget, obviously, Tamira Poindexter, 4 steals for Tamira. 4 steals for Tamira. And then, obviously, Terrence Sides coming off the bench, doing what she needs to do. That floater, no, that's not even a floater. It was like fading towards the sideline, putting a shot up at the end of the shot clock. It was something that I didn't know that was going in, but baby, that was net. That was the best shot of her career. Beforehand, it was last season to when they were at Iowa and she hit it was a logo 3 in Caitlin Clark's house in front of Caitlin Clark. That was her best shot of her career before this game against Iowa State. K-State went 6 for 6 in overtime in this game. They meant business. They could have ended that game in regulation. They didn't. So what? What are you going to do? Come out pissed off and go 6 for 6 from the field. That's what you do. And that's exactly what they did, right? And I cannot forget Amani Lester. Amani, girl, snaps. You did exactly what you needed to do in this game. You used your passing ability. To me, in my opinion, you're probably one of the better passing bigs on this team and one of the top ones in the Big 12, considering the minutes that you've had, the opportunities that we have seen. You have that ability. And we know it. She knows it. Obviously, Coach Mittie knows it. What she was able to do was she was able to rebound. She was able to get 2 steals on top of it, 3 assists. Come on. She did exactly what you needed her to do to come off the bench in order to have that, by committee effort when Yoki's not in there. And that's exactly what she had to do. That's what she had to do. And I'm so proud of her. And every single one of us that was watching this game was absolutely proud of her. Had to be. It was something that you want, right? So obviously I did dive into that Iowa State game probably a little bit more than I initially wanted to. And so that's where I'm going to leave it at that. I wanted to deep dive into KU a little bit, but we can get that a little bit later in the show if we decide to. But first and foremost, we are going to head into break because we have a very special guest. We have Coach Mittie who's going to be on the other side of it. But before we get to that, we have to talk about homefieldapparel.com, where I got this really snazzy sweatshirt here. Got sweatshirts, they got t-shirts, they got hats, they got anything that you need that's K-State related or even not K-State related. Whatever floats your boat, go ahead and go to homefieldapparel.com and we'll be right back on From the Back.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your number one source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
All right, y'all. Once again, welcome back to Run It Back. I'm your host, Jazsmin Halliburton, and I have none other than K-State women's head basketball coach, Jeff Mittie, with me on the show once again. He really likes me, y'all, because some people don't get this kind of treatment, you know what I mean? But Coach, I really appreciate you for coming back on.
No problem. Glad to do it.
Of course. All right. So I know I talked about a lot in this first segment, and I know it's been a while since I spoke to you, and a lot of things have happened since then. But obviously, this team is the truth. They are the real deal, and obviously, there's always room for improvement. But we love what we have seen on the floor, right? And I know I was talking about in that first segment is a horror movie that K-State fans are familiar with, and that's unfortunately Ayoka going down, in the season, and the team keeps going up and up and up, and unfortunately, that's that injury. The same thing happened last year. There was that stretch to where K-State was trying to figure out what they're trying to do, and there was this kind of tough stretch of losses or really, really tough wins and things of that nature. And even when she did come back, it was still kind of not the dominance that we saw before. But now, of course, same thing happens again, but the story feels a little bit different now. So I want to ask you, how has maybe the experience of this team help with, as they go through this stretch without Ayoka, having that experience from last year going into this season, this portion of the season?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think a couple things. One, we went into the year with a different plan because of the previous year. So we went into that year, even Ayoka, we went into a different plan of maybe trying to rest her and in the non-con for us to be able to think about the future a little bit, grow up some post players, not just for in case of an injury, but just for the future of the program. So you've seen Amani Lester, you've seen Eliza Maupin, you've seen Kennedy Taylor really have good moments in there. And so that really started in the non-con. Now, we really didn't want to deal with an injury, obviously. You're never wanting to deal with that. But unfortunately, she has that injury to her foot. It was significant enough that it's going to take some time. And, so I think what the team has done, look, it's not easy. People think, oh, you just throw somebody else in there. Well, it's not that simple, right? We saw that last year. We played pretty good without her, but then even there's an adjustment period when she comes back. I think we're better this year in terms of being able to handle that. I think that when Ayoka gets healthy, and we do think we're getting good news there, everything looks to be on track. So she started doing some light stuff yesterday. My days are running together, so I'm kind of like, okay, what day was that? Okay, that was yesterday. She did some light stuff again today, but I think that's still going to be we're hoping for that 4-week timetable. And if that's the case, then we'll get her back with about 3 games remaining in the regular season. So that's what we're hoping.
All right. So obviously, that's obviously I know it's a big loss and it's something that can't be, fixed or adjusted to in one game. Right. And of course, the game following her injury, you have Colorado. Fortunately, it seems like Colorado has her number at this portion in time. Good for them for now. But, that was a tough loss for the team that finally was able to crack the top 10, right? So what was kind of, if any, was there like a mental shift after that Colorado loss for this team?
Well, look, in terms of going out to Colorado, I really liked our practices. I liked our preparation. I liked all of that. So there wasn't any qualms with that. Now, we did not play very well. Colorado deserves credit for that. They're, I think, 11-1, 12-1 at home. So it's not as if they haven't knocked people off there. But we needed to play better than that. It was the worst shooting percentage we got all year. We seemed to not be as aggressive as we needed to be. I think that there was some buyer's remorse after that game, both in the locker room, and there was a determination to correct those things when we got back from Boulder. And we knew we had a really hard stretch coming up. We knew, one, it was rivalry week for us. You're going to play a really good Iowa State team. You're then going to follow that up with a road game at Kansas. And our kids really responded and played well. So really, really pleased. And it's a big stretch for us, right? I mean, we've got a huge game tomorrow night with, I think, number 9 TCU. I think that's where they're ranked. So it's a big game for us.
Absolutely. And I want to backtrack a little bit to that game against Iowa State. Hell of a game. Overall, that was a team win if I've ever seen one, right?
Yeah.
Now, and it was an overtime game, really tough game. I think might have been the first overtime game, maybe since the last time you guys played Iowa State in Ames. I'll probably check back that later. But talk about kind of the benefit of having that kind of game against Iowa State in a season where you've been so dominant.
Yeah, it's a good point because we haven't had a lot of those pressure situations. We haven't had we've had a few, but not a ton. And we've had games where we've stretched the margin out. In this case, we stretched the margin out a little bit, but boy, every time we did, to Iowa State's credit, they made big shots and they made big plays. It was one of those games that everybody that texted me afterwards or hit me up on X afterwards was just saying that was one of the best games I've seen. It was a nationally televised game. So a lot of people watch that on national television, and all the texts were not only congratulations texts, but it was just a really enjoyable game to watch. Both teams competing, both teams laying it on the line, shots made at the end of shot clock, plays made both offensively and defensively. And then, really proud of our group because Iowa State makes that great push late, makes a couple of huge plays. We go into overtime, and then we come out of overtime, and Jalen Glenn absolutely gets us off to a great start. She gets that push early for us, and then Serena Sundell makes plays, and Poindexter, and I mean, we just had everybody make plays in that overtime.
Absolutely. And something that I highlighted before in the first half of the show was the defense. The defense, these past 2 games have been incredible. Obviously, we know Gapco, we know the identity defensively for this team. Everybody knows, right? But it seems like outside looking in, on my unprofessional opinion, that the defense decides to just absolutely ramp up, especially when we know that offensively, Yoki's not there. Is defense been kind of a little bit more of a focus these past couple of games in order to try to get that offense moving, a little bit smoother?
Well, it's been an emphasis that we need to extend the floor a little bit, and we need to get some turnovers. I was not happy with the number of turnovers we were creating, and so that's been a big emphasis. I think when you talk about the Iowa State game, Audie Crooks is such a factor down low that when she catches the ball, and we did not stop Audie Crooks. I mean, she had 28 points against us, but what we did do is we did make her uncomfortable. We did get some turnovers in there, and that led to some transition baskets. And so I think it's one of those things where I've been really pleased with our center's defense. I think Kennedy Taylor's played well. I think Eliza Maupin's played well. Amani Lester had a huge game against Iowa State. I failed to mention Amani Lester and Taryn Sides in overtime were 2 of the big-time players. Taryn hits the incredible horse shot behind the backboard at the end of the shot clock. But from a defensive perspective, we're maybe not we don't have necessarily the shot blocking presence that Lee brings, but we've been able to extend our defense, and we've been pretty solid there, I think.
Absolutely. And now you talked about TCU briefly before. Big game. In my opinion, that seems this potentially could be for the conference. Whoever wins this game, right? K-State at 1, TCU at 2 as far as standings, the exact same record. So what stands out to you about TCU?
I think they've got a three-headed monster that's as good as anybody in the country, really, not just the league. I mean, when you're talking about Haley Van Lith, Madison Connor, and Sedona Prince, you've got a point guard that can score and distribute. You've got a scorer in Madison Connor who can really shoot the three at a high level, and you've got a post player that you can not only run offense to finish at the end, you can run it through her because she's a good passer. So you've really got that kind of offensive potential with them. So I really think they really do run their stuff really well. Mark's done a great job with them. And so they're every bit of what you would think a top 15 team is. They've got good balance. They've got good scoring across the board. And then defensively, they're just really sound with what they do. And they've got a shot blocker at the rim. So if they make some mistakes, Sedona's done a great job of erasing those problems.
Absolutely. It seems like on paper, K-State and TCU seems like very, similar teams as far as, offensive field goal percentage, defensive field goal percentage. Obviously, K-State has a better, opponent 3-point percentage than TCU does. But once again, you talked about their defensive efforts. So what does your team need to do in order to try to get this job done tomorrow night?
Yeah, I think a couple things. One, I think we've got to make sure that Van Lith is not scoring a ton and also distributing. It's one thing, I look at some of her games and she's had 20 plus points and she's had 8, 9, 10 assists. Well, you're contributing to a lot of things there. And that's hard because their pick and roll game is as good as any team in the country. With Sedona, you just got to make it tough on her. You can't give her the easy ones. You can't give her the rebound putbacks. You can't give her drop down layups, all these kind of easy ones. So you got to make it tough on her. And Madison Connor, you better get to her quickly because if you get there late, she's like our shooters. If you get there late, they're going to make a majority of them. And so you better get there early and you better arrive on time and you better not have your hands down because you might be there, but if your hands are down, she's going to shoot it.
Absolutely, Coach. Well, I appreciate you stopping by. Is there anything else that you would like to add or for people or fans to know about, as this big game approaches?
Well, you know what? I think it's going to be a heck of a game. I know administration announced that all the general admission tickets were sold out. We had 1,000 students at our last game versus Iowa State. We had a good number of fans travel to Lawrence for the big game on Sunday. So we're excited about it and I think we'll have a great atmosphere tomorrow night. It's going to be two great teams, two really, really balanced teams. And I think it'll be a heck of a battle.
Absolutely. I cannot wait to watch, even though I can, because I'll also be a nervous wreck when I do watch it. But Jeff Mittie, I really, really, really appreciate you for coming on.
Well, Jazsmin, thank you.